cloaked in folds of midnight waters, side by side, we sons and daughters, we set forth for no king's orders, but we'll sail together.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another interview with Betsy, the co-author of Pirate's Black Heart. Say hello, Betsy.
Hello.
So
I'm so glad to be back.
Yes, I'm glad to be able to do this. It's been a very long time since I've done any form of video blogging or anything regarding the story, so this is going to be a bit bumpy, but we'll get through it. The first thing I want to do with our interview is kind of tell everybody, in your words, Ipsy, what is the Pirate's Black Heart in general, kind of synopsis of everything we did in the last 6? What's this story kind of about?
It's about Butcher and Betsy's relationship. Mostly. At least that's how it's been going.
So
the relationship and their hardships. There's a lot of hardships between these two.
Yeah, they definitely have a destructive path ahead of them.
Sorry if you can hear my cat in the background. He's a little noisy back there. Lay down.
Okay, so I don't know. I would think that the story's been, like you said, about them. It's kind of a romance novel in a pirate world setting. The time frame isn't quite caught up to, it's a little beyond Pirates' golden age, right? So we're just a few years past that, and we've altered the world a little bit.
Yeah.
What would be something that you would like recommend to anybody stepping into the story that hasn't read it before?
Like they should reference something, or the story itself?
Yeah, like if somebody was wanting to read this and they weren't sure, they were like on the edge, is this worth reading? What would your advice or recommendations be? What would you say to somebody thinking about reading the story?
Well, if they plan on reading it, they need to consider that there are some triggering parts in there, and not just in the later parts, but in the beginning parts. There's a lot of adult content, I should say. And if they're not prepared to read something like that, then they should.
Right. The brutality is pretty high. The horror, well, with most of my stories, horror is pretty high. And the brutality in this particular story is quite high, right?
Yeah. Like I said, if they can't handle that type of stuff, then they don't need to be reading it.
Okay, let's take a quick moment and talk about the world thread.
Okay. I did not bring that up, but
That's all right. That's all right. This has kind of been a collage between the two of us, and it's just a build on the world. I use it for like everything. Anytime I have to look something up, I throw it on the world thread so that I don't have to look it up again.
Oh, I reference it too quite often. I forget what some of the characters' names are and what their purpose is, because it's mostly Butcher and Betsy that gets used the most, but there are like some side characters that pop up every now and then.
Right. And it also gives a basic overview of the whole world, right? I mean, we go into the year, we go into the differences in types of slavery that we had involved in this, because, I mean, we are talking about pirates. That was one of the commerce back then. And then we've got all the characters in there, and we'll get more into the characters a little bit later, but it's just overall, I found it to be extremely helpful when referencing characters repeatedly and also just expanding the world in general. I mean, we've got guns on there, we've got different punishments, we've got different laws, different rules.
Oh yeah, you talk about some history too with it, just like actual pirate history, not just the history for the thread itself. It's kind of it takes like a historical route, but it's historical fantasy.
Right, and I think so too.
Completely historical.
I think it's got a lot of historical facts to it and a lot of I mean, it's fantasy, but it's got a lot of reality based into it.
Yeah.
Okay, so when we last left off, we were talking about a big event that was coming. We had already spoken about Crowley starting to pay attention in our futures that we had going on with the with what we had planned and stuff like that. Let's talk about how that unraveled. Right? I had just told you about this huge thread detailed ship battle that I had written about. But before that, there was this massive incident that took place, which was the pinnacle of their story. It seems to be like the backbone of what their whole future has been based off so far, was that pinnacle point, and that was Betsy being kidnapped by Crowley.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, I call him Crowley.
Okay, Crowley works.
Crowley.
I called him Crowley.
Whatever you want. That's okay. We all pronounce things differently. So I'm gonna say Crowley, so you know. But yeah, that's how I've pronounced it. But yeah, he wanted to. His whole reason behind capturing Betsy was to use her as a key to lure Butcher to him. He wanted him to. He had an offer where he had a man of war, and he figured that the two of them could like team up, become one whole fleet, and travel together. He viewed Butcher as like a father figure, sort of, and it was kind of, how do I put their relationship, or at least how it was creepy. You know, it was like one of those situations where, like, I don't know how to explain it. But yeah, he viewed Butcher as a father figure. I don't know what else to say.
No, it's good. You're right. He viewed Butcher as a father figure. He did this whole plot to capture her so that he could work himself into the chain boats and kind of sail side by side with Captain Butcher. But really what I wanted to talk about is more about what happened when Betsy was kidnapped, because this was a lot of you. Like, I didn't do a lot of controlling of, you know, the Crowley's ship, or the Lusty Storm as he called it. I didn't do a lot of inner workings on that ship. I didn't do a lot of NBCs or you know, other interactions on that ship. I kept mostly everything onto the Bloody Bones. So almost everything that happened on that ship was because of you as an author, as the co-author, and that's what I wanted to talk about, is kind of what drove you to take things to that length, and you know, what was going through your mind when you did all that, because she ended up, the aftermath is pretty interesting too as well. So we'll get to that, but what kind of was your mindset going into, you know, being taken by Crowley and being on that ship? And Betsy was on that ship for a little over a week, right? She was almost on there for 2 weeks almost.
Yeah, and it wasn't a pleasing experience for her. She was used as basically a sex slave, I should say. It's not quite the term, but it describes what I was going for. She was used by mostly all the men, and then Crowley at the end took her into his chamber, and he asked her a few questions. Like, he just wanted to know more about Butcher and what his plans were. But Betsy at the time didn't know a lot about his plans. She was captured herself, and you know, they had just arrived in Nassau. She didn't know too much. She didn't go with him whenever he was speaking to the people in port that he spoke to. She was off doing her own thing, and she tried to explain to him that she was nothing more than a whore, and he didn't believe that, and he tried to force himself onto her. And in port, there was rumors going around that she was um, she was known to be a witch, a sea witch.
Right.
And she remembered that people were talking to her about that, and she used that to her advantage. There was a storm that was brewing off into the distance, and she could hear the thunder, and she basically, she like came up with some strange sounding spell type thing, and it scared him, and he backed off of her. He believed that she was a witch because the storm had grew stronger and louder as it came near after she said that, and he was like, backing off, you know.
Right. So after she had been violated by just about everybody, including Crowley, there came this massive ship battle, and this was the post that I spoke of in our previous interview. That was the hardest post I've ever written. I mean, hands down, to date, even now, it is still the hardest post I've ever written. I did so much research for that post, and it was just this huge ship battle, and I had to calculate all these things, and it was just a big explosion in my brain of just going too far. But it was fun. And when they invaded the ship and the fighting took place, you were really adamant that she get this scar. Why was that? What was this scar to represent? In as an author, in your mind, what was this scar to represent?
I wanted it to be something that would be a constant reminder that it had happened, that he's been pushing Butcher. Whenever I reference he, it's Butcher. He has been, you know, he believes that while she's in his care, nothing could happen to her. Nobody would take her, nobody would think about it, but it happened. And I wanted there to be a scar on her somewhere. That way, if he ever seen it, looked at it, he was reminded of that day that she had been taken away from him. And there was a possibility that she wouldn't come back from it. That was the point for the scar.
Okay. So it wasn't just a sporadic spur of the moment thing, then. You had planned this out.
Yeah, I wanted it to be any time that she had been standing before him in the nude, and he would see that scar, he'd be like, you know, it would be a thought in his mind. He'd see it, and then he would remember that she had been taken from him. He couldn't protect her. He tries so hard to protect her, but he just knows that he can't do it all the time.
And this has led to a whole level of insanity and psychosis that it gets deep, right?
Yeah.
Because he never is quite the same after that.